to reach those sorts of people, because when you're doing a standing start and you need money, within like a couple of months, you're not like, it's a non-starter. I wouldn't even bother, because unless you've got one person who can get you into one place that will just like give you a ticket. I just think it's really, really unlikely that you'll get anywhere. Because also everyone operates really differently, and some people will accept intros, some people will accept, people, they've got open door policies and they'll take every pitch, but the likelihood that most of them are like oversubscribed and will not get back to you for months is really high. So we decided to focus on angel investors, because firstly, because we were really early stage, we were pre-product. We were essentially pre-revenue as well, because even though we'd run these tests as an sort of agency service, most of them were tests, so we didn't charge a huge amount for them. And we essentially we had validation that the concept worked, but we didn't necessarily have validation that the format of delivery would work in terms of a platform. So we had, a lot of black marks against us, I suppose, in terms of like traction and all those sorts of things. So we focused on angels because firstly, I think there's a much bigger focus within angel communities around investing in the founder and investing in their belief that they can, even if they can't realize the vision that they've got right now, they will make something happen. And that might involve, pivoting, and basically they're sort of looking, I think, to see whether you can hack it. Like, can you hack like whatever you're sort of walking into? And it was actually it was a long process. The first thing we did was build a deck, and I think by the end of when we closed the round, the deck was completely unrecognizable from what it was to begin with, because it probably changed about 100 times throughout the process. And we were also doing this in the middle of COVID, so everything was online, which, to be fair, was not the worst thing in the world, because you can get more calls in a day rather than running around various cities and stuff to try and meet people in person. But it was really tough. You get so many no's, and it's really demoralizing sometimes, and you're basically like laying yourself bare for people, and there are times when you just think to yourself, like, this isn't going to come off, and am I even doing the right thing? Should I then consider maybe another form of funding, or should I look at loans, or those sorts of things? So it was a really long journey, and we were really lucky with the investors that we did get on board, because they took a sort of punt on us at a really early stage. It took much longer than I wanted it to. It was a real grind. You have to go full time into it. I couldn't really do much else in the business other than do that. So if you don't have any money to like pay your team, you're basically just fundraising until you're ready to go. And it was tough. Yeah.
I believe you. I pitched myself like maybe, I don't know, 10 times, and it was, oh my God, I never want to go back there again. But yeah, if you were doing it like full time, I imagine how hard it was. But how did you go to investors? Like, basically, how did you choose an investor to go to? Did you try to find someone in the niche, or like someone with an understanding of like what you're doing, or how was it? Or basically you just went to everybody?
I wish I said that I went to people in like our niche, and we did look, specifically for people that invested in whether it was marketing or ad tech or like impact investors. That was our sort of ideal investor. But we also knew that at this really early stage, that like isn't necessarily something like, and also our industry, we're a cross section of two industries. So we've got impact side and the marketing side. And so finding the right people that have sort of the cross section of the two of them was really hard. So our focus was more on investors that support really early stage founders, and they're sort of sector agnostic, and what they care about is supporting the founder in whatever industry they are in, which means that they don't necessarily have the same added value in terms of network or connections, but they do have the value in terms of understanding how insanely hard it is at this early stage when you've got basically nothing and you're trying to make like this big thing out of like nothing, and like magic it into existence. So we went out, like, honestly, I treated it like a sales campaign, and I actually automated a lot of it, which is probably not what my investors want to hear. But
how did you do that? I mean, share the tricks.
I found well, I actually don't know like whether I should talk about this, but basically what I did, I had like some early stage people that I'd been introduced to, so they were helping me, who were like, they didn't necessarily commit straight away, but they were helping me understand what people were looking for, how to approach people, all of those sorts of things, which is like hugely valuable when you have no idea how to approach an investor. But my thought process was like, you're essentially asking them to buy a part of your business, so you're essentially selling something to them, and it took me a while to get to that point, because I thought I was basically begging for money. That's what I went into it with thinking, and I was like, no, there is value in this idea and the potential of it, and I'm selling a part of my business to them, so that they can have a stake in this, the potential of the business. So firstly, the mindset change was there. Then I was like, right, I'm going to deal with this like a sales campaign. How would I approach people to buy like the potential of this business? And then I found, essentially, I went on Sales Navigator on LinkedIn, and I found pretty much every investor I could find in the UK that was like an angel investor or an impact investor, and also consulted loads of other lists and stuff that you can find all over the place. And I scraped their LinkedIn profiles, and I automated with Phantom Buster, which is a like sales outreach platform, basically a connection request saying like, hi, I'm Nicola, I'm the founder of Views for Change. We're transforming marketing for good. We have an angel opportunity, would love to discuss it with you. And then my theory was like, if they didn't want to hear anything about it, they wouldn't accept my connection request, because I've been upfront saying, this is what I'm here to talk to you about. And if you don't want to talk to me about it, like basically just don't connect with me, and that's fine. And then if they did respond, or they did accept my connection request, then I'd follow up with a personalized, I'd personalize it. I'd make sure that they were a good fit first. Which I actually, talking about this now, it actually sounds really bad, because you're supposed to find the perfect investors and all that sort of stuff, but I did it backwards. I found them first, and then I decided if they're a good fit, and then from there I would decide how much effort I would put into them, and like trying to close them. So if they were, they had a background in marketing investments or impact investments, bit like, I'll spend more time with them, and I would then craft the pitch through that, based on who had come back to me saying they were, or indicating they were interested, and then all while doing that, we were also just leveraging as much of our network as we possibly could. And some of, like, maybe two of our investors were basically 10th degree connections from someone I started talking to within the beginning of the raise. So I don't know, I'd speak to someone I knew at a marketing agency, and they'll be like, oh, you need to speak to this person, and then 10 times later, then we'd finally find an investor that actually had money to invest and was interested. So leveraging your network is one thing, but it takes a long time if you don't already have people in your network that are ready to invest.
Absolutely. No, I think this is something you should definitely talk about, because it all sounds absolutely perfect, and so good to like try and find the perfect fit. Never pitch to never pitch an NFT marketplace to a person that invests in fitness apps, but do it, and you never know what can come up, and who they know and who they can refer you to, and stuff like that. So the power of network is a tremendous power, and I absolutely I support you 150%. This is amazing. I think you should you should definitely talk about it more.
I'll do an automation playbook.
That's good. But you were talking a lot about network, and I know that you're super active in social media, and you go to talks, and you go to events. So how does it help you? Of course, like ultimately it helped you fundraising, right? But how does it help you work on your business, and grow it, and I don't know, maybe your brand now is also a lot bigger, a lot more recognizable. So how does it help Views for Change?
Hugely, I think. It's funny, I've got a couple of friends who are founders, and we kind of all do this thing where we say, like, we've got to post once a day on LinkedIn or post once a day on Twitter. And I actually have been really slack on that over the summer because I needed a bit of break from the social medias. But it is unreal how many opportunities you can get just by being like present and engaging with people. And I think a lot of people that don't do it don't realize how effective it can be, and how many opportunities come out of those things that you would never have even thought were there. Like I've engaged some of our best advisors through just them seeing something because one of their connections has seen what I'm doing, or I've asked a specific question and they've someone's come back. So it is like really vital. It is also really vital from a credibility perspective that you know your space, and you're recognizable in that space as well, I'm not going to say I'm a thought leader, but like someone that has done enough work in this space, and they haven't just like spun up something out of nowhere because they think it's the next hot thing. Like, I'm a marketer and I care about impact, and those are my sort of core areas that I talk about, with a bit of sort of stuff around being a female founder and a first-time tech founder and all of those sorts of things. But it helps you it helps you with the sort of 0 to 1 phase, or the pass and go phase of a startup. I mean, YC says that you should like do stuff that doesn't scale, and I think that's exactly what this is about. Like, if you are just like hammering away at your network and building that community and building trust and building credibility, then you'll find your first customers, and you'll find your first investors, and you'll find those people because they're all there. You've just got to like build enough credibility that they'll be willing to talk to you. And interestingly, one of our first users for our ocean plastic initiative was someone who was connected to me on LinkedIn, then forwarded my post to a brand and said, you should do this. And then they just booked a demo call, and now they're working with us. So it's like those sorts of chain reactions are real, but it does also take a lot of times and a lot of emotional sort of bandwidth, because you can become quite sort of dragged into your own metrics of success. Like, what if my post doesn't get enough traction, then no one cares about what I'm about to swear then. No one cares about what I'm what I'm doing, or like my business is going to be a failure because no one's liked my post, or and like those sorts of imposter syndrome pieces do come into play when you're putting yourself out there a lot. But I think it's hugely valuable, and I know people that have literally like raised investment on their network on LinkedIn. So it's valuable from every angle of the business, and I think this is probably not the best sort of like backup attitude to have, but even if the company failed, you've built a network of people that have watched you build in public in whatever format that looks like. You're not necessarily, specific metrics and things, but they've seen you like go through that process. And I mean, I've been offered jobs. So, what else, if it all goes tits up, then then at least I've done some work to do a sort of live CV.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can, I sign after, every word you say, because I absolutely 100% agree with everything, because it takes time. Like, this is how, the podcast started. We thought, oh my God, everyone's doing it, and kind of, it looks cool. But we started in summer, and we're like, oh, but everyone's on vacation. And we thought, if it goes well, we're going to be pretty much the only ones doing something over the summer. We'll have our momentum. But then again, if it goes tits up, no one's going to notice because there are so few people. But totally agree. It's and it does take time and some, emotional attachment to all that. And it's great that you also mentioned an imposter syndrome, because I think a lot of people are talking about it, but at the same time, I feel like it's getting to this phase when it's also almost like another trend. Everyone has an imposter syndrome, but yeah, how do you deal with that? And because you've worked in a marketing space for so long, but then you went to this impact space, so how did you like make sure that you don't have an imposter syndrome, and that you have enough expertise like to tie them both together?
I mean, I'd say I still absolutely do. And I think everyone does. And I think that's the case, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. It's being used as a sort of a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but I think it's born out of trends in the way that we live in society now. And like, if you go on LinkedIn, and this is, I mean, I'm just using LinkedIn as an example because this can get quite a lot for me sometimes. It's like, you see all these other founders, everyone is always just reporting on the good news stuff. And I do that as well. And no one, I mean, there's like some people are talking, really openly about the struggles as well. But ultimately, every time you're posting, you're also kind of selling how well things are going, why people should get involved. So you don't want to be talking too much about like how much chaos is going on behind the scenes, and like the fact that you had 3 sleepless nights in a row because something broke on your platform or like, you don't necessarily want to talk about that stuff, because then that'll be a reason why someone might not want to then work with you. So we've kind of created this like a show reel, highlights reel of our like careers in our lives, and then all you see from everyone else is like this good news stuff. So I'm like, all these people are doing so well, but actually my life is really crazy and chaotic and it's not going that well. Like, how are they doing this? And even though I know, I'm like, in my rational mind, I know that they're just showing the good bits just like I am. And I know that people have come to me before and said like, it seems like everything's going really well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how stressful things are right now. Or like, I'm literally on the brink of burnout. Or I had it actually recently, and this sounds like a really backwards flex, but I don't mean it to be, but I won an award, the Founder of the Year award at the Tech Spark Awards. And it was
congrats,
at a time,
by the way.
thank you. But it was at a time where things were really, really tough in the business. And I like couldn't reconcile that, because I was there, posting on LinkedIn being like, I've been awarded the Founder of the Year, like we don't, all of that sort of stuff. And then behind the scenes, I was like about to burn out. And I remember saying to a couple of my friends, like, I feel like a complete fraud, because on the outside, I'm showing all these people that like, I'm doing really well and everyone's recognizing me for the things I'm doing. But actually, I feel like everything's about to fall apart. And I think we don't talk about that sort of stuff enough. And if we did, it would probably like reduce everyone's feelings of, being an imposter or being not good enough, or anything like that. But I mean, it's really hard to do that without then potentially impacting the sort of sales credibility of your business. So it's a hard balance to walk, but I try where I can to sort of be relatively honest with, I mean, here right now, about like how things aren't always that great, and things are really hard a lot of the time. And I think that's probably the case for most people. And I think that's where the space for your sort of more private community, or your like your female, like I've got a group of female founder friends who we all just like basically constantly moan about how hard everything is, and that sort of community is so important as well, because you have to save face in a lot of public spaces. So having that support system behind the scenes that supports you even when things are really terrible is really important.
Oh, it's great. I mean, when you mentioned the group where you can just be yourself and just unleash like what's going on in the business, I think it's amazing. And the support system and the relationship within the company, and with your connectors and with your supporters and networks is really important. But well, ultimately, a relationship with your investor is another kind of relationship, right? And what were you looking for in this way? Like, were you looking for someone who would be there and like be able to support you and like walk you through some rough patches, or someone who would just, you know, give you the money and just laid back?
So, I mean, like I said earlier, I didn't have any idea how investors operated, and
Yeah.
so I think there was an element for me of making sure that we had to have aligned values. Like we're in the impact space. It's really important to us that's the first thing that is thought about.
Yeah.
And also we are a pending B Corp, so having, you know, asset locks in our articles and having those sorts of everyone's a stakeholder approach, and our business is a force for good, not necessarily just for profit, was absolutely vital to our investors, or our investor sort of relationships. And I think there's different ways that investors can add value. So you've got you've got some that just give you money and then they basically disappear, and you send them an update every month, and sometimes they'll be like reply being like, looks good or something like that, and I'm like, great. And then you've got ones, I mean, depending on how you're sort of structuring your investment round, like we have about, in our first round we had about 14 angel investors. So having a personal relationship with each of them where they're all supporting you a lot is probably too much, because I mean, if I was meeting with them all once a month, then that's too much. You know, you can't spend that time doing that. So you generally find that within that group, you've got some who are more engaged than others, and also some who have specific, you know, skill sets or areas that they can help with. So one or two of our investors are like highly strategic investors who have backgrounds in areas that I need to tap into, whether that's through network but also through experience. And then we've got a couple of investors who are basically my cheerleaders, who I love. And they ask me questions like, oh, I don't know, I'll give them an update or something, and we'll meet for coffee, and they'll ask me questions like, how are you feeling? Or like, are you okay? Or like, they'll buy me lunch and be like, are you eating enough? Literally be like, I'm like their child, but in like a way that's like they're like supporting and caring for like me as a person, and the business is an extension of what I can achieve if I'm being, you know, my best self. And that is a huge value add when you know that people have got your back, even if you need to pivot, or even if you need to like change something drastically in the team, or like you need to have a really hard conversation with someone, that you know that they'll sort of support you through that, is hugely valuable. And even ones, you know, that will put themselves out there for you as well. You know, they'll promote your business with their networks, and they'll do introductions for you. And I've got a couple of investors who actively send me emails like, you should speak to this person, I know them, I'm going to introduce you. And I think there's so much value that you can gain from your investors, but having an understanding of what you're expecting from that relationship is really important. So the ones that gave money and disappeared told me that straight away, like, we're willing to invest, but we don't want to have like any sort of don't call us if well, right. I mean, obviously call us if like something is about to go really wrong, but you know, don't, you know, the everyday stuff, they're not wanting to be involved in that,
right?
But others, you know, we just go for lunch and have a nice chat and get to know each other really well, and like have a sort of supportive relationship. And then others have really specific added value in their spaces, but they're all super bright people, and you know, you can learn from all of them. So yeah, I'm lucky to have the people I have around me.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I don't want to say you're very lucky, because there is no luck involved in, you know, in a successful fundraising. But ultimately you got something figured out, and I'm super happy for you. We've got a comment here. You will find your customers and investors, they're all there. You just need to build enough credibility so they talk to you. Mm-hmm. I think yeah, that makes total sense. But let's get back to fundraising a little bit. And mm-hmm. Yes, of course, you did it in the beginning of 2020, right?
Yeah, so most of 2020 was raising. Yeah.
So did you feel like, because now everyone's talking about like the investment being in a recession, and not being able to get funding, or not being able to get the same amount of money that they were able to get in like 2018. So did you feel it, or was it a bit too early for that?
I think we were a bit too early to feel that. I mean, I can see it now. I see it with my friends who are raising investment, and we're also prepping to do a seed round. And in that process, I've been speaking to a number of funds and investors to understand where they're at and what they're looking at the moment. And there is a consensus that things have changed considerably, but I think it's not. It's like a reckoning that was bound to happen, because we hit our pre-seed in the time when there was lots of cash going out and high valuations, and you didn't have to have much traction. And you see some businesses, like big tech businesses, just raising investment, and then crashing. And there's some great examples of them. Some of them are brilliant stories, but not great for their investors. But I think now we're in this space where everyone's realizing that just investing in tech in the way that we were isn't the way that we should be investing. And maybe these really early investments before you've even got any sort of proof of concept is not the best. However, having said that, my understanding from what I've read is that like pre-seed and seed has been sort of largely unaffected in terms of how much money is available, but there's just a rebalancing of what they're looking for. So it's not the same sort of growth at all costs. I was about to say spunk. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but spunk all your cash into in like as quickly as possible. It's about capital efficiency, like doing as much as you can for the least amount of money as you can. Validate your ideas. Make sure you've got proof. Make sure you've got like early revenue to prove that people are willing to pay for this. And if we raised investment now at the same position as we did in like 2020, is it 20? Where are we now? 2022. Yeah, 2020. Then I think we would have really struggled, because we were pre-product, pre-revenue. We're basically an idea and me, which I'd like to think would still be worth investing in. But now I think you've got to show much more, unless you are a bit lucky and you find the right person who's willing to take that risk. And I think a lot of startups will fail in this process, because we've created this sort of like ecosystem where fundraising was quite easy, and I mean that like compared to what it's about to be. I think it was especially if you had a specific if you hit one of the trends, then you were bang on. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, and I think people are going to have to get scrappy and get really creative about how they use their money and how they get traction, and can't rely on funding, because investors that I've spoken to who have capital to deploy are deploying it to their existing investments and doubling down on them. So new investments are going to slow down from what I can see. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, maybe we should talk after I've tried to raise a seed round and see what happens.
Oh yes, absolutely. We'd love to do that again. And good luck. And
thank you.
I hope
I'm putting it off at the moment because I'm like stressed about the idea of doing it again. But I'm also really excited because I think it could unlock a huge amount of growth for us. So if there's any investors watching, you feel free to drop me a message.
No, absolutely. I mean, we will share it all with our network, and fingers crossed, we're all rooting for you. But another thing that we absolutely, I think, have to discuss is you being a female founder, and have you ever had any challenges with that? And what investors did you get in the end? Like, the majority still male or female investors? What's going on there?
So yes, the majority of our investors are men. But I think that is a problem in the format of encouraging women to be angel investors. And I'll give a shout out to We Are Radical, who were massive advocates of us during our fundraise, and you should definitely touch base with if you don't know them already. But they are campaigning and also building their own sort of platform that is encouraging women to become investors. So I'm not going to bastardize their stats and things, but it's a brilliant initiative, and we all know that more women investing means more women being funded. So
Right.
and women's businesses tend to have a positive impact element to their business model. So or an ESG angle or something that is an impact led business or purpose driven. Right. So ultimately, if we can get more women to invest, then everyone wins. Most of our investors are men, and yes, I did have loads of problems with being a female founder.
Okay.
I think the most blatant ones were just stuff like, are you going to have kids soon? Are you in a relationship? Things like that, which, to be honest, I just literally didn't even expect at all, because I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And also, I know some like really amazing people who have got children who are perfectly capable of doing all the things I'm doing, if not better, because they're like and basically it was just like very frustrating to be even asked questions like that. So they were basically a flat no, because it wouldn't align, because that's just don't ask me stuff like that. I think the
imagine working with them later.
Exactly. No. But I think the saddest thing about that is a lot of people ask those questions completely unintentionally, being biased or offensive or anything like that. They don't necessarily realize like how that shouldn't make a difference, and they think they're asking that question with your best interests at heart. So there's a big piece of work to be done around that. Yes. But I think for me, the thing that challenged me the most, and I saw this in our previous business as well, not just raising investment in like sales pitches and with customers as well, and especially because I've got a male co-founder, I could see, even though I was in the CEO position, or the leadership position, I could see myself being treated differently to my male counterparts. And Ozzy and I decided when we set up Views for Change that I was going to lead it, and I'm the majority shareholder, and it is it's my baby, and that I was going to lead on fundraising, and there was actually never even a question around the fact that I was a female founder and whether that would make any difference. But I know people who have got mixed gender teams, or the leadership teams, who have chosen to put their male co-founders forward for fundraising because it's so much easier for them. And it's in the sort of nuance of how people ask you questions. And there's an art, I think, to responding to this that I didn't even realize was a problem until way further on in my fundraise. And just even now, I'm learning how to sort of manage this. But men, well, in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, so don't sort of take this as a everyone's experience, but when I'm asked a question, it's around how are you going to mitigate that risk, what are you going to do if this happens, and basically like there's a negative like connotation to what's being asked, and whether I can hack it and whether I'll be able to deal with that issue. Whereas for like Ozzy, for example, and I'm sure he won't mind me talking about this, it's much more about like, well, how are you going to unlock that piece of growth, or how are you going to like, it's more around ambition, and there's articles about this, so I can try and dig them out, and we can post them or whatever. But there's actually probably a term for it as well, but I can't remember it now. But you feel it when you're like constantly having to turn things around to make it back to being a positive conversation and about like the potential of something, and you always being pushed back into being like on your back foot and having to defend yourself, rather than like talking about the really exciting thing that you're building and the potential like reward for everyone involved. And and then that really seeps into your psyche, because you then start becoming in defense mode before you've even started, which is a really dangerous place to be, because then you can't really truly like build on the potential that you have, because you're constantly thinking about all the problems and questions that you're probably going to get asked. So yeah, I've experienced that throughout my career, to be honest. And it's not great, but I also think like it's not, I don't think it's necessarily anyone's fault. I just think people aren't even realizing that they're doing that. And I also think it's quite sad for a lot of female founders that they feel like they need to sort of like I don't know if this is even a word, but like masculinize themselves. Is that a word?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
Let's make it a word. You know, like to be able to have conversations with people on a level. And I found it even, you know, in my career so far, I found myself becoming much more like bullish and abrupt, and not taking shit from anyone, because you have to do it to protect yourself. Otherwise, you know, you're vulnerable all the time, which is a shame, because actually like there's huge power in like femininity and creativity and all those aspects for men and for women. But we have a really specific idea of what a successful person looks like, and it's a pretty like one gendered view of how people should operate. So not great.
I absolutely love, you know, this saying, if it's a man, he's a boss, if it's a woman, she's bossy. So it's very unfair, but I absolutely agree again. And if you're a solo female founder, I think a lot of times you just don't know that it shouldn't be like that, and you just go thinking that, you know, fundraising is just a very negative experience, and, you know, nothing is good about it. Even if, you know, if you end up getting the investment, you know, you probably wouldn't want to go back again. But
which is how
absolutely.
I feel now. and also we should say, like, this doesn't even take into account, like, I have a lot of privilege on my side. Like, I'm a white woman in a like middle class area, and I have, you know, lots of privilege that I can live from, and that's a leg up for me. So it's worth saying that even though I have those like marks against me, or those, you know, biases that I experience all the time, that's nothing on other underrepresented groups that we're not even mentioning here, who will find this process much harder again. And there's just a lot of education and a lot of like honest conversations that need to happen with people, with themselves, and their part to play in it, and then also how we react to these things. Because when you're faced with a decision of, this person's offering me money to build my dream, or build like this thing that I think has huge potential, but I don't really like how they ask me, you know, about whatever, or they've expressed some level of bias towards me,
right,
then you shouldn't be faced with those questions where, like, I just want to make, should I just take the money because that's the easiest thing to do right now, even though you're compromising what ultimately is really important. And that's why I think, you know, groups where there's really specific focus on supporting, you know, like Alma Angels, for example. Shout out to Scott Mackin, and I've got 2 other Alma Angels as well, who like will only invest in female founders, and they their sole purpose is to uplift that whole group of people, and you completely remove that element of bias then. And I'm like, I mean, we could open up a whole can of worms here about how whether we should have like specific you know, positive discrimination in these ways, but when like whatever it is, 2% of funding is going to female founders, you're like, there needs to be some work to be done. There's some work to be done, and we all have a part to play in that, especially investors.
That's true. Oh, I mean, I feel like I could talk to you all day, you know, just keep it coming. Well, that's amazing. I mean, honestly, I enjoyed immensely, and everything you say is true. I think my experience has been pretty much the same, even though, you know, I moved away from the startup world. But anyway, could you maybe share, you know, the the one piece of advice that is absolutely, your golden ticket whenever, you feel like you don't want to do it, or I don't know, that maybe startup is not for you or something like that?
Okay, I'm trying to think, what do I tell myself when things are really hard? I mean, this isn't actually like properly, this is more therapy related than it is like work related, but I think it's so important to remind yourself that like no matter how bad things are, or whether you think you've done something wrong or whatever, like firstly, no one cares about what you're doing, and I mean that in a good way. Like when you're getting in your head about like, oh, this person must have thought this about me, like forget about that, move on and do the things that you know you can do like to the best of your ability, and just like move fast. But also remember that like you're good enough regardless. Like your business failing is not you failing, and having, failure as a sort of learning curve rather than a black mark against your name, or example of you not being good enough, is a really important thing to decouple, because your worth isn't attached to your success.
Oh, great. I mean, we couldn't
Just came up with it. I just made it up.
Yes, absolutely. 100% original thought, but but so true. I mean, anyway, and a lot of people forget about that, and that's why we all go to therapy.
Yes,
But
quite.
anyway, could you also just one more request for me? Could you maybe recommend someone or mention someone that you think could be a great guest for our next podcast?
Yes, absolutely. You should definitely interview Charlie Rosier at Babu, and I actually think you
Doing
might already
that.
have her.
Yes.
Okay, so if not, then Jess Alderson at So Synced. It's
Okay.
a dating app based on personality types, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
super interesting. So speak to both of them, and I actually have a long list. So if you want me to send that over afterwards, I will.
Yes, please do. Okay,
Amazing.
well, thank you for that, and thank you for the talk. I mean, I enjoyed it, and like I said already, I would definitely speak with you more and more, and hopefully we'll do that someday again. So
Hopefully.
thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
I've
Next
really
time we're
enjoyed it. Thank
going
you.
to talk a little bit more about investments. So we'll have Beryl from Antler coming
Amazing.
to the podcast and talking about the state of early stage investment in the Nordics. So thank you,
Well,
Nicola. It's been a
thank you very
pleasure.
much. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye,
See
everyone.
you. Bye.